Howdy folks. Have you ever noticed there's a lot of apricot liqueurs out there on the market? Have you ever wondered, which one should I get? What do they taste like? What's the difference? Well, we're gonna try and figure that out today. It's the Apricot Liqueur Showdown. All right, now before I go over our contenders, let me just say, for this showdown, I did not buy full bottles of 5 different apricot liqueurs because I don't want to have 5 bottles of apricot liqueur here at my house. I don't use apricot liqueur all that much, so you know, I didn't buy full bottles. What I did do was I got samples from work. They were downsizing their apricot liqueur selections because there are a lot and you don't really need to have every option available. So I got some samples from work, so I'm going to be tasting those samples. So I'm going to try these on their own, similar to the banana liqueur showdown we did recently. Then we'll make a drink. I've got a pretty simple apricot liqueur drink to try, and we'll see what we think. The contenders. First up is the one, you've probably seen it. I think it was one of the first apricot liqueurs to come on the market when unusual liqueurs started coming back on the market, and that's Rothman Winter. Rothman Winter is made in Austria from Klosterneuburger apricots. It is apricots soaked in an apricot eau de vie, so like apricot in apricot brandy. And it's imported by House Alpens, which, you know, they have a good reputation. It is 24% ABV, which is one of the higher ones actually. And it would have cost me $30 if I hadn't got the sample. A very sweet smell. Smells of apricots, obviously, but more almost like an almond smell to it. Almond cough drop, is that a thing? Yeah, let's try it. Let's give it a taste. A little sharp, very sweet. Almond, almost like a perfumey kind of a flavor. Yeah, that's not bad. Now I know that this uses eau de vie, so I'm wondering if I can somehow detect some of the eau de vie coming through. Rothman Winter is not bad. It's got a little bit of a perfuminess to it, a little bit of almond extract kind of flavor. It's also got a nice sort of lingering apricot. All right, pretty good. Next up is one of the fancy Giffard bottles, Giffard Apricot de Roussillon, which is exactly how you pronounce that. Now, Roussillon is a village in France. Obviously, this Giffard is made in France. It's made with neutral grain spirit, not eau de vie. It is 25% alcohol by volume, which is the highest that we're going to try today, and it would have cost me $37. Yeah, better clean the palate. All right, palate cleansed. Let's try the Giffard. Now, these Giffard bottles, they're always very specific. They have this slightly fancier line of liqueurs. And they'll be very specific. You know, it's Madagascar vanilla, you know, it's Brazilian bananas, and this is apricots from a particular village, Roussillon. So, you know, this might be nicer. Let's give it a taste. It doesn't smell as sweet. It's got a sharper apricot flavor, but still smells a bit like almond. I think these are all going to smell a bit like almond. Almond is related to an apricot because an almond is a stone fruit where you eat the pit, and most stone fruits you eat the fruits and throw away the pits, but an almond is like a weird kind of stone fruit. Before we taste this, by the way, this one is quite a bit darker than the other entrants. I don't know what that's from. Probably caramel color. A little bit sour, not as perfumey. Yeah, like a different kind of an apricot taste. It doesn't come off quite as sweet right up front, and it's got this lingering kind of almost like a spiciness, a little bit of almond still, but not as perfumey as the Rothman Winter. Maybe a little richer, a little chewier. It's got like a chewier texture to it, a little more viscous, I'd say. That's actually not bad. It's pretty delicious. Moving on. Next up we have Combier Apricot. They make a lot of different fruit liqueurs. We tried the banana last time. It is also made in France, also with neutral grain spirit. It is 20% alcohol and would have cost me $30. We got Combier. We're back to the sort of paler color. Not a lot of aroma. Just a very straight apricot aroma. Almost tastes like a, this is gonna sound weird, but almost like a bubble gum, like if you had a apricot gum. Something about just the sugar smell. Let's give it a taste. This tastes very sweet to me. Tastes of apricot, but not a super strong, intense flavor. Just a little watery, maybe. Certainly compared to the Giffard, more watery. Like the Rothman Winter had that sort of lingering perfuminess, probably from the eau de vie, and this is a little flat. This is so far not my favorite. Yeah, it's pretty short on the finish, mostly sweet. I don't know, not really very complex. But you know, still tastes of apricot, but not of much else, I guess. Next up, we've got an interesting one, Bitter Truth Apricot Liqueur. It is made in Germany. It is also made with apricot eau de vie, but what they're calling schnapps. It is 22% alcohol and did cost me $39 because I actually bought this bottle. So moving back to Germany and the Bitter Truth, it's got a very jammy kind of smell, apricot jam. A little bit of a little hint of a spice, and back to more strong almond aroma. A little bit, it's almost a little bit grassy too. This is strange. I'm gonna give it a taste. Sweet. It does have a lingering apricot. Not as perfumey, I'd say, as the Rothman Winter, and not as dark as the Giffard, but still a nice, fairly complex, sort of light perfuminess to it. Sweet, but not overwhelmingly sweet. I'm trying to detect if I'm getting any of that, schnapps, eau de vie flavor. And maybe I am, but in a different way. It's got this jammy texture, this jammy aroma to it. Almost a slight bitterness to it. Almost a little bit of a sharpness. Apricot jam, I guess you'd say. Maybe it's a little bit more acidic, that means. Yeah, that's not bad. That's pretty good. Last up is a bit of an outlier. We've got this stuff called Big's Junction Apricot Liqueur, which is made here locally in Portland from a place called Stone Barn Brandy Works. I've had this before many times, and it is very tart, just full of apricot flavor, and not very sweet at all. They actually make it with their own oat whiskey that they make in-house. It costs $40. It's 20% alcohol by volume. It's a bit of a weird one, but I'm throwing it in here because I have it and I thought you might be interested. The weird thing about Stone Barn is it's cloudy. It gets sediment that settles down in the bottom, so you have to shake up the bottle. They say you should refrigerate it too. I'm not sure why, but I guess it's got a lot of sort of fruit left in there. And you can tell they use a weird base for this. It smells, I don't know if you've ever had oat whiskey, but it's a bit strange. It's got a certain aroma to it, which kind of comes through on the nose of this apricot. Woo! Yeah. So tart. The one thing I love about Stone Barn is that they really just go for it. If they're making apricot liqueur, it's just a ton of apricot and not a ton of sugar. It's just full of this sort of dark apricot flavor. They make a cranberry liqueur as well and a few other things, and they're all like pretty intense and pretty sour. I kind of love them. But like I said before, this is almost a different category altogether because it is like just so sour. You almost can't use it like a liqueur in a drink. You have to use it for apricot flavor and then separately sweeten the drink with something else, which is how I've ended up using it in the past. When we move ahead and make cocktails, I will add a little sugar to the Stone Barn cocktail because otherwise it will not be sweet enough. Speaking of the cocktail, I've got a pretty interesting cocktail here for you. It's very simple. It's very apricot forward. And I was talking to my boss at work, Brett, who suggested we make this cocktail called the Paradise. Now, a lot of you may have heard of a Paradise cocktail, which is gin, apricot, and orange juice, but that sounds gross. And he had a different drink called the Paradise, which was from an earlier cocktail book from the Waldorf Astoria, and which he included in his book that he wrote, that Brett wrote, called Raising the Bar. He wrote this book with my other friend Jacob, and it's actually a pretty interesting book, especially if you're new to home bartending. They start you off with assuming you have some basics in your bar and a bottle of bourbon. They suggest some bourbons, and then they show you how to make an old-fashioned. And then in the next chapter of the book, you add another bottle to your bar. So in the second chapter, you add gin to your back bar, and then you can make, you know, a French 75 or a Tom Collins or whatever. Then in chapter 3, they start talking about vermouth, and you add vermouth to your bar, and then you can make, you know, a Manhattan or a martini or whatever. And then the book you get more and more bottles in your back bar as the book goes along, and there's more and more drinks that you can make as you add bottles to your bar. So pretty good concept, pretty good writers, a lot of good drinks in there. And the drink that he suggested that we make for this is in the book, and it's called the Paradise. And like I said, not the Paradise you're thinking of. This one is just rum, apricot liqueur, and orange bitters. So it's a pretty apricot heavy drink, which I love because that'll be a good way to test out these apricot liqueurs. One caveat, this drink is supposed to be served on the rocks, but I'm gonna serve it just in a coupe glass, just up, because I don't want them to sit here and get watery before I have a chance to taste them. So just to make this a more fair test, we're going to serve them up, and you know, that should be fine. Also, there's no rules. You can drink your drink however you feel like it. Okay, let's mix them up. We did it. We got our drinks made. Now, as you saw, we used real McCoy 3. I was advised by Brett that, you know, a straightforward rum works best in this, not like a super funky Jamaican or something really out of left field. So I kept it real plain, so we can see, let that apricot shine through. Okay, let's try Rothman and Winter first. You know, a nice sort of gold pale color. Not bad. Definitely taste the apricot. Some of that perfumey apricot almond flavor kind of comes through. Not a super long finish, but a little bit of lingering sweetness. I mean, as a drink, it's a pretty simple drink, but it's actually very enjoyable. Let's try the Giffard. The Giffard was darker and maybe a little richer and more complex. Let's see how the drink holds up. It's definitely a shade darker than the others, that's for sure. That richer, darker, it's almost like a burnt sugar, like a brown sugar maybe, or like a caramely kind of flavor comes through in this. Yeah, that's really nice. These so far, both of these stand up pretty well in the drink. I was a little worried that, you know, a boozier drink maybe overpowers the apricot, but no, this is not bad. Moving on to Combier. Combier quite pale, actually. A little bit paler than the Rothman. Definitely getting more of the rum in this one. Not as intense of an apricot flavor. A little too sweet, maybe. It's sort of kind of a gummy kind of a flavor. That one does not stand up as well in the drink as some of these others have so far. You get it as like a sweetness, but there isn't a ton of apricot flavor there coming through. So far, Combier might be the loser of these. It's also the cheapest. So, I mean, maybe not a huge surprise. Now on to the bitter truth. Bitter Truth is, you know, medium dark. Darker than Combier, but not as dark as Giffard. Still a lovely looking drink. You definitely get the apricot flavor, some of that lingering jamminess, a little bit sharper. It's a little bit of a sharp, that acidity I tasted earlier, I think, comes through in this drink. Gives you a little bit of a hit at the end of like this sort of, I don't know, the sort of acidity, I guess, from, like I was saying, like an apricot jam. That's not bad. I don't know, a little thin on the texture maybe. I think texture-wise, Giffard is the best, and it's certainly the most complex. Bitter Truth isn't bad, and Rothman's got a nice perfuminess, but the Combier maybe not the best. All right, let's try the Stone Barn. This one might be a bit weird. I did add a little bit of sugar to this, so let's see what we think. I mean, no surprise, the color, the darkest of all. This apricot liqueur is just, it's a dark brown instead of sort of a light orange. Whoa. Yeah, sour, pretty intense with that oat base and that intense sour apricot flavor. Possibly a more interesting drink, but maybe needs to be adjusted. Like if you're gonna use the Stone Barn apricot, you have to do some tweaking. You can't just substitute it into a classic because it's gonna be wild. But this was always an outlier, so you know, now you know. Okay, some conclusions. Which apricot liqueur should you buy? I'm gonna say maybe avoid Combier. Not super complex, not a ton of apricot flavor, a little thin on the mouthfeel. Rothman Winter, not bad, widely available, not super expensive. That might be a good bet. It's very perfumey. They use eau de vie in the manufacturing process, which, you know, adds a little more complexity. Giffard, dark, like sort of richer, thicker mouthfeel, somewhat complex, maybe some brown sugar notes. Pretty interesting, and comes through in a cocktail. Not bad. A little bit more expensive, but not bad. Bitter Truth is sort of in between those two. It's a bit complex. It's a little perfumey, still using eau de vie from Germany. It's got a little bit more almondiness to it and a bit of acidity, almost like I was saying, almost like an apricot jam. Pretty good. Also a little bit expensive, but might be worth it if it's available in your area. And of course, if you're in the Northwest, Stone Barn is a nice place and you should support them. And this apricot liqueur is kind of bonkers, but fun to play around with. If you're willing to do some tests, you can come up with definitely get some good drinks out of that, but not a substitute into a classic. All right, hopefully that was entertaining and or informative. If I've missed an obvious apricot liqueur, let me know down in the comments. And if there's a liqueur I should tackle next, also let me know that as well. Anyway, in the meantime, thanks for watching. We will see you next time.